You're listening to Real Life, No Filter, where raw emotions and real moments take center stage. No masks, no filters. Just honest stories about life, love, and everything in between. Get comfortable. We're about to begin. 20-year-old Daniel sped down the deserted highway. He had only recently gotten his driver's license, but he had learned to drive back in his youth. His father had given him the first lessons. Together, they had driven along these same empty roads when they came to visit his grandmother in the village. And now, Daniel was returning from his grandmother's, but no longer alone, feeling truly grown up, free and independent. What a wonderful feeling. Music blared in the car, and the trunk was packed full of village treats. Daniel had come to the village to help his beloved grandmother with her garden. He felt sorry for the elderly woman. She was completely withered, barely hanging on. But she just couldn't give up a habit that had taken root over many years. Year after year, she planted the beds, tended the plants, and in the autumn harvested the crops. She flatly refused to move to the city, closer to her children and grandchildren. So the relatives took turns visiting the old woman, helping, chatting, and sharing news. Having gotten his license and his own car, a used black Lada Priora, Daniel started visiting his grandmother more often than others. And there were several reasons for this. Firstly, as the youngest grandchild, the only boy among 6 cousins and sisters, he had always been his grandmother's favorite. There was a special bond between them. They understood each other without words. Even now, next to his grandmother, Daniel felt warmth and comfort, just like in childhood. There are mama's boys, and he was a grandma's boy. Secondly, she lived in the village, the beautiful Sarah, the daughter of his grandmother's neighbors. In childhood, she had seemed to Daniel like a nasty and annoying girl, skinny, pale, constantly complaining to her parents about the noisy boys Daniel spent time with. The boys tried to get revenge on the tattletale at every opportunity. Sometimes they threw dry berries at her back. Sometimes they invented offensive taunts and shouted them right in her face. But one day, arriving at his grandmother's for the holidays, Daniel realized that everything had changed. From an awkward teenager, Sarah had turned into a beautiful young woman, and her character had changed too. She no longer complained about the boys or looked down on them. Sarah made witty jokes, laughed heartily, and there was always something to talk about with her. She danced at discos in the village club. In short, on the eve of his final year of school, Daniel realized he was in love and began paying the girl attention. Sometimes he would give her a bouquet of wildflowers. Sometimes he would give her a ride on his bicycle to the post office. Sometimes he would help her carry a bucket from the well. But Daniel turned out to be just one of Sarah's many admirers. He had too many rivals. The girl clearly preferred Michael, a guy from the next street. This fact seemed only to fuel Daniel's feelings more strongly. He decided to fight for his love, which he had been doing ever since, for almost 4 years. Sarah, like him, went to university after school, but Michael stayed in the village. His father was seriously ill, and his mother couldn't cope with caring for her husband and the household alone. Without the help of her eldest son, the family would have had a very hard time. So the guy stayed home, found a job, and continued to support his family in a difficult situation. Sarah came home every weekend, and the first thing she did was run to her boyfriend. She missed him during the week and eagerly awaited these meetings. Daniel thought he had all the trump cards now. Michael was there, in the village, while he, Daniel, was in the city, right next to Sarah, and he had even gotten his license. His father had even given him a car after that. an enviable catch. But Sarah continued to treat Daniel as a friend, nothing more. Her heart belonged to Michael. Daniel couldn't understand the beauty's choice and refused to accept that she preferred someone else to him. He continued to persistently pursue her favor. "You're good, very good," the girl told him more than once. "You'll meet your love yet. You'll fall in love with someone. Look around. There are so many beauties." "I only need you," Daniel stubbornly insisted. "But that's impossible," Sarah shrugged. "Michael and I are getting married soon." Daniel tried to convince the girl that she was making a big mistake, showered her with bouquets of roses and gifts, which at some point she simply stopped accepting, and even stalked her. He hated Michael, with whom he had played a lot in childhood. He pointed out to Sarah what he considered obvious flaws in his rival, but nothing helped. After studying in the city for 2 years, the girl transferred to distance learning to be near Michael and help him care for his father. This was something Daniel simply couldn't grasp. His feelings for Sarah still wouldn't cool down. The girl was right. There were always many attractive girls around Daniel, but for some reason, none of them caught his attention. Daniel often went to his grandmother's because of Sarah as well. Seeing her, even from a distance, admiring her walk, her long, dark, shiny hair, her huge green eyes, that in itself was happiness for him. It was a pity the girl didn't talk to him at all now. She even seemed afraid of him, trying to keep her distance. He had certainly gone too far with his persistent courtship, of course. But Daniel wasn't about to give up now, either. A truly cunning plan was maturing in his head. The guy decided to approach it from Michael's side. He planned to show up at Michael's work sometime during the week with a couple of his friends, strong guys with bats, and have a serious talk. If he could intimidate Michael and force him to break up with Sarah, who knew, maybe the girl would pay attention to him then. She would need support, involvement, and he, at the right moment, would of course be there, happy to offer his shoulder. This was exactly what Daniel was thinking about now, pressing the gas pedal to the floor. The road was smooth, empty. He could speed up. The guy felt like he wasn't driving, but flying. Forest bordered the road on both sides. The leaves were already starting to yellow. Soon the trees would be dressed in gold and crimson. Daniel hoped that by then Sarah would finally be his. Of course, the guy understood that his plan was, to put it mildly, despicable. But he believed that in love, all's fair. Sarah had to be his, period. Daniel was used to getting what he wanted since childhood. It had always been that way. Suddenly, the guy noticed a small dark spot in the distance. It appeared from the forest thicket and was rapidly approaching the highway. Daniel slowed down. Maybe it was some animal crossing the road. A large one, judging by its size. Twilight was already deepening. It was hard to make anything out ahead. The distance between Daniel's car and the strange object kept shrinking. Soon the guy realized it wasn't an animal at all. A child was standing on the side of the road. This was incredible. The nearest village was 50 kilometers away, and the city was just as far. This was a deserted place. How did a little kid end up here? Was he lost? Daniel stopped next to the child, opened the door, and looked closely at the boy. He was clearly in a state of shock. A disheveled, frightened boy who looked about 10, trembling violently. His clothes were crumpled and torn in several places. The child's face seemed vaguely familiar to Daniel. "What happened?" he asked the boy. The boy tried to answer, but only a choked wheeze escaped his throat. Daniel understood. It was from the fear he had experienced. "What happened?" The guy repeated his question, trying to make his voice as soft and friendly as possible. And then the boy burst into tears. Tears streamed from his eyes. He cried, his whole body shaking, though he was clearly trying to hold back the sobs tearing from his chest. Daniel's heart squeezed with pity for this terrified child. The poor thing was lost, probably scared out of his wits. The guy approached the boy and did something that was, in general, not his style. He hugged the kid tightly, pulled him close. The child immediately went limp in his arms and sobbed even harder. Daniel stroked the boy's head and repeated that everything would be all right now, that it was all over. "No, it's not over." The boy suddenly looked directly into his eyes. "Mum's there. Uncle Alex is keeping her locked up, and now that I ran away, he'll kill her." What? An unpleasant chill ran down Daniel's spine. The theory about a boy lost in the forest, which had formed so neatly in his head, crumbled after these words from the foundling. Everything was much more serious, if the boy was telling the truth, of course. "He took us away and kept us in cages for a long time. Mom helped me escape, but he came back when I was leaving. I heard him approaching the hut. Now Mom will have a bad time because of me." A forest hut. Cages. Daniel couldn't yet understand what had happened there, but it all sounded terrifying. The guy realized that he himself was in danger. What if this mysterious Uncle Alex came running out onto the road after the child right now? "Let's call the police," Daniel suggested to the frightened boy. "They'll come. You'll tell them everything, okay?" "Yes. Just hurry." The boy was in a panic. He was clearly very worried about his loved one, literally unable to sit still with fear. Daniel looked at the child more closely. Large grey eyes, a slightly upturned nose, a scattering of freckles on a tanned face. Of course. The guy remembered where he had seen this boy. Just a couple of weeks ago, a woman and child had disappeared in the city. They had gone to the cinema and then hadn't returned home. Their photos were plastered on every pole, and these pictures kept popping up online. And then the news, as always happens in such cases, lost its relevance. A school burned down in the city, and a high-profile incident occurred. Now everyone was only talking about those events. The search for the woman and child continued, but it no longer attracted as much interest as before. And now, standing before Daniel, was that very boy whose photos had been so frequently seen everywhere just recently. The guy even remembered his name. "Is your name Sam?" Daniel asked. "Yes," the boy nodded. "Call the police quickly. Mom doesn't have much time. He'll get angry." Daniel, without losing time, dialed the right numbers and briefly explained the situation to the dispatcher who answered the call. He asked them to send a unit because presumably a woman was in danger in the forest, the mother of the boy he had found on the road. The guy could only give his location approximately, but they assured him that the cell signal had already been tracked and fixed, so they would find them. All that remained was to wait. Daniel invited the boy into the car. The child settled into the passenger seat next to the driver. "Maybe you want a chocolate bar?" Daniel remembered that he had an untouched bar in the glove compartment. Sam shook his head negatively. It was understandable. He wasn't in the mood for chocolate now. Daniel saw that the boy was in a terrible state from the stress he had endured and his anxiety for his mother. The guy really wanted to distract the child somehow, to make him feel better. But he didn't know what to do in such situations, and so he just sat silently beside him, his arm around Sam's thin shoulders. Despite his young age, the boy was a real hero. He managed to escape, find his way in the forest, run to the road, and call for help. Daniel looked over Sam's head at the trees from which he had emerged onto the highway. What if that very Uncle Alex was watching them from there right now, waiting for the moment to pounce? Daniel remained on alert the whole time. If anything, he would floor it and speed away from this dangerous place. Finally, flashing lights appeared in the distance. The police! Daniel exhaled with relief. Only now did he realize how tense he had been all this time. 2 patrol cars and a Gazelle van with a small squad pulled up. They were wearing helmets and bulletproof vests, tall, strong, dangerous. Uncle Alex certainly wouldn't be able to handle guys like that. See? Everything will be all right now. Daniel patted Sam encouragingly on the back. Sam looked at the people in uniform with eyes full of hope. The boy was led aside by 2 men in plain clothes. They asked the child questions, probably trying to find out the details of the story and the location of the hut where Sam's mother was left. Finally, the people rushed into the forest, while Sam, Daniel, and several police officers remained on the road. All they could do was wait. Daniel watched the boy. He didn't take his eyes off the forest. A woman in uniform approached Daniel, introduced herself as a police captain, and informed him that she needed to take his statement. The guy nodded. He understood that he was now an integral part of this whole story. He couldn't just leave. Time dragged on endlessly. An ambulance arrived. Sam was taken into the cabin. The doctors probably needed to examine him. "No, I'm not going anywhere!" The boy's voice suddenly rang out. "I'm not going anywhere without Mom." Daniel understood that they wanted to take Sam to the hospital, but he couldn't leave until he knew his mother was all right. And Daniel understood the boy perfectly. The child jumped out of the car and ran to him. Daniel took Sam's hand. They stood together on the roadside and looked into the forest. It seemed calm, impassive, perfectly ordinary. Daniel had driven past this spot many times during the 2 weeks the boy and his mother had spent in the hut, and he couldn't even imagine that something so terrifying was happening somewhere behind the trees. Finally, the police officers appeared. First came those in helmets and bulletproof vests. They hurried towards their Gazelle. 2 strong guys were leading a man, overweight, wearing a stretched red sweater and sweatpants with baggy knees. Daniel realized this was the Uncle Alex, but he couldn't make out his face. The man's hands were behind his back, forcing him to walk practically bent in half. The boy squeezed Daniel's hand harder. He watched the man in the sweater with frightened eyes until he was pushed into the Gazelle van. The vehicle was already pulling away when 2 more police officers emerged from the forest. They were helping a slender woman with large grey eyes, just like Sam's. "Thank God, she's alive!" Sam rushed to the woman, hugging her tightly around the waist. She wrapped her arms around her son's shoulders. Both of them sank into the grass and just sat there, silently looking at each other. The police officers didn't disturb them. They understood everything perfectly. Daniel watched the reunion of mother and son, his heart overflowing with a variety of feelings. The guy didn't immediately notice the tears rolling down his cheeks. This was finally the release of the emotions that had overwhelmed him all this time. How much had happened? It was simply incredible. The plot of a gripping thriller had unfolded right before Daniel's eyes, only here it was all real. The story ended well, but the realization of what could have happened sent a chill through his heart. The woman and the boy rose from the grass and, together, embracing, accompanied and supported by the police, walked towards the ambulance. As they passed Daniel, Sam touched his hand and quietly said, "Thank you." Daniel just shook his head. What could there possibly be to thank him for? And what had he really done anyway? He'd just called the police, that was all. And then the guy met the gaze of the woman, the boy's mother. A beautiful face, regular features, and a smile. A wonderful, gentle smile. Looking at her, it was hard to believe that this woman had endured so many trials. She had been held captive for several weeks and had just been in mortal danger, but there was no sign of it on her. Daniel suddenly felt a strong desire to talk to her, to find out what had happened, to ask if she and the boy needed his help. But the woman and Sam were already being led to the ambulance. As she entered the cabin, Sam's mother suddenly turned back to Daniel and smiled at him. The guy felt as if he had been struck by lightning from head to toe. It seemed that this smile made a greater impression on him than the story itself. Daniel knew he would often remember this episode now. The city was once again stirred by a story that had begun to fade from memory. The woman and the boy, Catherine and Sam, had been found. What happened to them was a ready-made plot for a thriller. Mother and son had become victims of Alex, a man with a psychiatric diagnosis. Many acquaintances of this man didn't even suspect that he was ill. Alex had friends and a job. He led the life of an ordinary person. True, the 36-year-old man lived with his mother and didn't have a girlfriend. But that wasn't so strange nowadays. It happened. It seemed Alex had seen Catherine's photo on social media and fallen in love with the beautiful woman. The presence of a child didn't stop him. The man tried to start a relationship with the beauty. He wrote her long confessions of his feelings, waited for her with flowers near her entrance. But Catherine, first politely and then in a categorical manner, asked him to leave her alone. Alex couldn't accept this. Perhaps it was his nature, or perhaps it was a consequence of his illness. But the man firmly decided to get his way. He built a hut in the forest, prepared everything carefully, even insulated the walls. He planned to keep his captives there in winter too. And then he took Catherine and Sam away when they were returning from the cinema. Mother and son were searched for everywhere. Even theories about them being taken to another country were considered. And all this time they were very close by. He kept us in cages, Catherine recalled in an interview. He didn't touch us, didn't hit us, didn't threaten us, nothing like that. He brought food, cared for us in his own way, talked to us a lot. But we were afraid of him, of course. I realized that this person was unwell and anything could be expected from him. So, as soon as I had the opportunity, I helped my son escape. He brought help. Catherine and Sam became famous. They even flew to Moscow for a talk show. Their story was now known throughout the country. Daniel was also invited to these shows and interviews. Of course. After all, he was the one who had found the terrified boy on the road. But the guy refused. He didn't want all that fuss around himself. He watched Catherine, looked at her photos, admired her on screen. Yes, Alex could be understood. There was something very appealing about this woman. Not just her external beauty, which was undoubtedly present. Charm, fascination, charisma, something elusive. And then, after a few weeks, this astonishing story, as usually happens, was forgotten, faded into the background. New topics for talk shows and scandalous articles appeared. And then, about a month after everything happened, Catherine suddenly wrote to Daniel in a messenger app. She probably got his number from the police officers. The woman thanked the guy for his help and suggested meeting to discuss everything that had happened. Of course, Daniel gladly agreed. He really wanted to see this woman, hear her voice, learn about everything that had happened firsthand. After all, unlike other ordinary people, the guy understood perfectly that he would never forget this story. He often recalled Catherine's smile directed at him and his feelings about it. And sometimes he dreamed of Sammy, just as the boy had emerged from the forest, disheveled, terrified. all crumpled and dirty. Daniel really wanted to know how the boy was doing now. The boy hadn't participated in the talk shows, and there was hardly anything about him in the articles. Obviously, Catherine was protecting her son from excessive attention. Well, she could be understood. At the appointed time, Daniel arrived at the restaurant where Catherine had suggested they meet. He saw her immediately. The woman was sitting at a far table in the corner, gazing thoughtfully out the window. Long chestnut hair framed a narrow face with regular features. A dark turtleneck and tight jeans highlighted her graceful figure. Beautiful, composed, somehow a little distant. Seeing this woman, some strange, incomprehensible feelings stirred in Daniel's soul. Nothing romantic, although Catherine's appearance certainly lent itself to such impulses. Daniel still only dreamed of Sarah, but Catherine clearly attracted him, intrigued him, occupied his thoughts. "Good afternoon," Daniel greeted politely as he approached. A strange awkwardness suddenly came over him, and when the woman turned her gaze of incredible grey eyes on him, the guy even seemed to blush. He hadn't done that when talking to the opposite sex in a long time. "Hello," Catherine smiled charmingly. "Finally, I can thank you in person. But I didn't do anything special. I just called the police. But your son is a real hero." Well, how to say it? Catherine's face clouded over. Sam. He actually ran out to the road in a different place before he met you. He saw 2 or 3 cars. He waved his hands, tried to attract attention, called for help. But they drove past. But you stopped. Daniel shook his head, stunned. He simply couldn't comprehend something like that. How could someone ignore a small child's plea for help? He could understand if people were afraid of an adult man on a deserted highway, but a boy, a 10-year-old child? Catherine seemed to have read his thoughts. "It's not surprising," she said. "People don't need extra problems. Who knows? Maybe they thought the child was a lure, that if they stopped, a gang would jump out of the forest. Or they were afraid of something else. But if you hadn't stopped, who knows what he would have done to me?" Seeing that Sam managed to get away, he started acting very strange. I had never seen him like that before. Catherine started talking about him, about Alex. She didn't look like a victim at all. In her grey eyes, Daniel noticed contempt, hatred, but not fear. There wasn't a trace of the horror she had experienced. It seemed Catherine was either a surprisingly strong woman or an excellent actress who managed to hide her true feelings. "He didn't harm you?" Daniel asked. This question had bothered him all these weeks. It had been tactfully omitted in the numerous interviews. Catherine had only said that she and her son were kept locked up in cages. Alex's hut had even been shown in one of the reports. Daniel had seen these cages, essentially just a part of the room fenced off with bars, with a partition. The boy was in the smaller section, Catherine in the larger. In the corners of both rooms, Daniel noticed inflatable mattresses with blankets and pillows. It was terrifying to imagine that mother and son had been in such conditions for several weeks. Well, how to say it? Catherine thought about the question. Physically, no. He never hit us, didn't even touch us. He wanted to win my favor peacefully. He talked to us a lot, to me, tried to please me. He even sometimes brought my son and me dinner from an expensive restaurant. Only I saw. His patience was wearing thin every day. He was becoming more irritable, angrier, even crazier. The climax was not far off. I felt it. An unpleasant chill ran down Daniel's spine at these words. He suddenly felt how defenseless and powerless Catherine must have felt in the hut, how afraid she was of what might happen to her, and most importantly to her son. You asked if he harmed us, Catherine continued. In a physical sense, no, of course not. But how this incident will affect my son's psyche and character, even the doctors don't know. How is he? Daniel asked. Sam's fate interested him greatly. The guy was worried about the boy, hoping he was all right. He seems okay now, but Sam is still seeing a psychologist. These sessions help, of course. Only sometimes my son wakes up at night. He dreams of something terrible. True, he tells me he doesn't remember his dreams. So of course this whole situation left its mark on him. And for that, and only for that, I hate Alex. If it weren't for what's happening with Sam now, I would even feel sorry for him. A sick person, strong feelings, couldn't cope. And besides, he sincerely believed he was doing what was best for himself and for me. What? Daniel couldn't believe his ears. Catherine had just felt sorry for Alex. In the interviews, she had acted completely differently. Maybe I'm partly to blame myself, Catherine continued. I saw that he fell in love with me at first sight. I didn't need him myself. He wasn't my type of man at all. But like any woman, I liked to flatter my vanity. So sometimes I smiled at him. Sometimes I met his gaze. His reaction was pleasant to me. He would blush so sweetly, get embarrassed, and his eyes would literally light up with joy and delight. Knowing that you drive someone crazy, your self-esteem soars to the sky from that. It's important for any woman, especially after another failed romance. But I read that this Alex, that he saw on social media. Just an interesting story for the press, and instructive too, teaching young people to be more careful with online dating. In reality, it wasn't like that at all. Or rather, not entirely like that. Will you tell me? Catherine smiled. Let's use you informally. I understand I'm about 10 years older than you, but when you use the formal you, I feel like a complete old woman, as if I'm your teacher or elderly neighbor. Daniel nodded and slightly rephrased his question. So, will you tell me? You? Well, I have to talk to someone. Looking at you, for some reason I'm sure you won't take this story to the press or gossip about it everywhere. No, of course not. I just want to know how it happened. I think about it a lot. About you. About Sam. It's not surprising, because you also became a part of this story, a significant character. Of course, I'll tell you everything, if you have the free time, because it will be long. Daniel assured her he was ready to listen until morning, and the woman began her story. Catherine became a mother early. After her 3rd year of university, she went to the sea for the first time without her parents, with university friends. The beach, night discos, fun, drinking. In short, that's where Catherine first fell in love. And with whom? With an adult man, about 15 years older than her. But he was so handsome, and also erudite and gallant. And importantly, he had money. No, Catherine had never been mercenary, but money gave Victor opportunities to court her beautifully. Restaurants, expensive attractions, gifts. All this, combined with the man's charisma, completely turned young Catherine's head. The man didn't hide that he was married. He had come to the resort town on a business trip. Some important conference was being held there. Catherine was, of course, a little upset at first, but then decided that whatever happened, the main thing was that they were happy right here and now. She had to enjoy the moment, take everything from it. She couldn't let thoughts of something serious and insurmountable spoil these wonderful days. True, the evening before parting with Victor, the girl couldn't hold back her tears. She knew perfectly well that the man would fly back to his distant city tomorrow, to his wife and children, and they would never see each other again. Catherine would be without his blue eyes, with a sly squint and charming smile, without Victor's gentle, strong hands, his scent, which made her heart sweetly stop and her head spin. But don't. We had such a good time. Victor awkwardly stroked Catherine's back. Comforting crying girls was clearly not Victor's strong suit. The man couldn't find the words to console his young lover. Give me your phone number. I'll call you sometimes just to hear your voice. In reality, Catherine dreamed of more. She hoped that with time, Victor would realize how strong his feelings for her were. But for that, there needed to be some communication, even if only by phone. That's unnecessary. Victor tried very hard to make his voice sound soft and gentle, but the girl felt that he had suddenly tensed up after her request. Everything that happened here will stay here. A resort romance, it happens. Catherine looked up at the man who just moments ago had seemed to her the best man in the world. He said that phrase, a resort romance, in such a way that the girl immediately understood. For Victor, this was a common occurrence, and she was far from his only girl. It was as if Catherine's eyes were opened. It seemed that Victor started an affair on every business trip. The girl found the strength to break free from his embrace, turn proudly, and leave. Of course, it was a bitter disappointment for her. First love, and then this. But Catherine coped. She got through it. Only this wasn't the end of the story yet. Returning home, the girl realized she was expecting a child. That was the real shock. Seeing 2 lines on the test, Catherine was probably truly frightened for the first time in her life. Her heart was gripped by icy fear. What to do now? So much was ahead. Explaining to her parents, arranging a new life, changes in her body. Difficulties loomed on the horizon. And yet, Catherine firmly decided for herself that she would have this child. That's how she got Sammy. In the delivery room, holding the tiny, warm creature, Catherine understood. It had all been worth it. And the arguments with her parents, and the misunderstandings with friends, and the difficult pregnancy. Here he was, her gift, looking at her with trusting grey eyes. She was the whole world to him. Of course, Catherine's father and mother helped her a lot. They supported her physically and materially at a time when their daughter was so defenseless and vulnerable. Naturally, she had to endure their lectures and sermons. They just couldn't understand that Catherine was now an adult, a mother herself. To them, she remained a little silly girl. So, as soon as she had the opportunity, Catherine rented an apartment for herself and Sam. The girl transferred to distance learning, got a job, and moved out of her parents' home. At this moment, the woman finally felt completely free. Life took on new colours. Sam grew up. With each day, he became more independent and reasonable. Catherine could now talk to him about a variety of topics. Mother and son cared for each other and enjoyed life to the fullest, both together and each in their own way. Catherine started meeting friends. She periodically had romances. The woman wasn't planning anything serious for herself yet. She and Sam were happy living together. She didn't want to let anyone else into their well-established, cozy world. Romantic relationships were needed for Catherine to boost her mood. Thanks to men, their compliments, attention, and admiring glances, she felt like a woman, beautiful, attractive. She needed this like air. Apparently, the old trauma from meeting Victor was still affecting her. Catherine had truly fallen in love with him then, with all her heart and soul, and he had made the young girl feel like one of many. So now Catherine strove to feel unique, special, needed. This is what played a cruel trick on her with Alex. The woman met him in a group of friends. They had these interesting quiz games in their city. People, friends, acquaintances would gather in small teams. Then a meeting would be organized somewhere in a restaurant or cinema, and a host would give interesting tasks. Sometimes they had to guess films from dialogues, or songs, or artists from descriptions. There were many challenges, and they were all fun, intriguing, and unexpected. Catherine enjoyed discussing options, finding solutions, and even arguing in the company of like-minded people. Their team never took prize places, but they didn't end up at the bottom of the list either. The core of the team was constant. The ideological inspirer and leader of the group was Helen, Catherine's colleague, who had gotten her hooked on the quiz. She was always accompanied by her constant silent neighbour, Susan, and her husband, Steve. And the other participants changed periodically. Some, like Catherine herself, appeared from game to game, often skipping, but when they had free time, they came to the quiz meeting. Catherine mostly knew these people. They were acquaintances, relatives, and colleagues of someone from the core team, Helen, Susan, or Steve. Occasionally, the team was joined by newcomers. Some of them didn't stay, played once or twice, and never appeared again. Or on the contrary, they became regulars at the quiz meetings. Alex became such a newcomer. Seeing an unfamiliar face at another game, Catherine was, of course, interested. The man looked a little older than her, overweight, with short curly hair, a bright shirt, colourful shorts, a fleshy nose, and small, attentive eyes. There was something a little effeminate about his appearance. In short, he was somewhat awkward, funny, but seemed harmless. He looked like either a hamster or a Pekingese. Usually in films, such people have a light-hearted nature and a sense of humour. Alex indeed proved to be kind and cheerful. He joked a lot, guessed most of the answers, pulling the team up to a respectable fourth place. Pleasant, easygoing. Catherine, of course, couldn't help but notice the impression she made on him. Alex, when he thought no one was looking, literally devoured Catherine with his eyes, openly admired her, examined her. Sometimes their eyes met accidentally, and then the man would immediately look away and, it seemed, blush. This was pleasant. Although Alex didn't attract Catherine romantically, not at all. She liked a different type, like Andrew, with whom Catherine had broken up just the other day and was still upset about it. Because he had broken up with her for someone else, a young, beautiful girl with long legs and a wasp waist. Catherine had seen her. A beauty, of course. There was no denying it. Again, the woman felt rejected and broken, an unpleasant feeling. Andrew. Catherine had been happy with him, but she hadn't truly loved him. She had just enjoyed the moment. So the breakup hurt the woman's self-esteem more than her heart. And Alex, with his eyes burning with admiration, was now boosting that self-esteem without even realizing it. So Catherine deliberately added fuel to the fire. Sometimes she would smile at Alex. Sometimes she would praise another of his correct answers. And sometimes she would even casually touch the man's shoulder, supposedly reaching for chips or cola. He would flinch every time at these touches, as if Alex was shaking. This reaction. Catherine was playing. She enjoyed this state. And watching the effect her supposedly accidental gestures had on Alex was a huge pleasure for her. At the end of the evening, everyone was standing on the porch and chatting. No one wanted to leave. They discussed the game, joked. But tomorrow was work, and people started saying goodbye one by one. The crowd gradually thinned. It turned out that everyone had come in pairs, with husbands, boyfriends, or sisters, like Helen and Susan. Only Catherine, as usual, had come alone, but Alex had too. He, it turned out, had been invited by Susan. They worked in the same office and often met in the smoking area. But Susan, as usual, was going home with her sister and her husband. So Alex and Catherine were left, as it were, without partners. "Can I give you a ride?" Alex asked, his eyes shining with hope. "I'm driving myself." Catherine smiled. She felt her power over this man. Right now, he would do anything she told him to. But the woman wasn't going to cross the line. Yes, it was very pleasant to feel that you had such an effect on a person, on a man. But what was the point of open flirting if Alex wasn't her type anyway? Yes, he was kind, funny, humorous, peculiar. But no, there definitely couldn't be any relationship between them. "Okay then," Alex sighed disappointedly. "But we'll see each other again, right?" "Well, the quiz games are held about twice a month, sometimes more often," Catherine replied evasively and slipped into her car. She was already looking forward to the evening drive through the city, when there were few cars and pedestrians on the roads and the city lights sparkled everywhere. Now she would turn on her favourite music, open the windows to let the wind blow through the cabin, and fly forward. A wonderful end to the evening. Catherine missed the next quiz game. She had a lot of work, and she had promised Sam a trip to the zoo for a long time. For some reason, the woman was sure. Alex had definitely come to the meeting, and not just for the game itself. He hoped she, Catherine, would be there. And indeed, Alex was captured in the photos posted in the group a few days later. In some pictures, he looked lost and disappointed. Or maybe Catherine had fantasized the whole story. And then, 2 weeks later, there was another game, and this time Catherine decided to go. She didn't have any urgent matters anyway. Sam's holidays had started. Everything at work had settled down. Why not meet up with friends? The game was held in one of the city's bars. Catherine was a little late. She miscalculated the time and got stuck in traffic. When she entered the hall, everyone was already there. Alex saw her. His eyes lit up with joy. Catherine pretended not to notice, greeted everyone, and took her seat. This time, Alex was much more active. He no longer hid his gaze, openly looking at Catherine, complimenting her, trying to help with something, bringing her a drink, moving her chair. And when the waitress took a long time to bring Catherine's order, he caused a huge scene. Everyone in the group noticed Alex's obvious interest and even started making harmless jokes about it. If last time such attention from the man had boosted Catherine's self-esteem, now it was burdensome and unpleasant. The woman tried to maintain a distant, cold, but at the same time polite demeanor. It was her own fault. She shouldn't have practiced her charms back then. But Alex didn't seem to understand hints. He switched places with one of the guys and was now sitting next to Catherine, constantly touching her hand as if by accident. Catherine could barely wait for the game to end, said goodbye to everyone, and quickly walked towards the parking lot. This time she declined the offer to walk in the park with the large, noisy group. She loved such walks. But Alex was there now. He wouldn't leave her alone. It was awkward to rudely reject the man in front of everyone, but Catherine wasn't going to tolerate his persistent courtship either. He met her in the parking lot. It was already dark, so Catherine didn't immediately notice that Alex was waiting for her by the car. The woman even flinched in surprise when she heard his voice. "Can you help me?" "What?" Catherine tried not to sound too annoyed. She hadn't gone for a walk with her friends just because this persistent admirer was there, and now he was here, asking for some kind of help. "My car is in the shop, so I walked today. Can you give me a ride downtown? It's on your way anyway." Catherine thought she had seen a car key in Alex's hand earlier that evening, but maybe she had just imagined it. Okay, sure. The woman smiled politely and opened the door for him, inviting him into the car. On the way, Alex talked her ear off, talking about everything, clearly trying to find a topic that would interest Catherine. But she remained cold and distant, nodding occasionally, but not participating in the conversation. She felt somehow uncomfortable next to Alex. At their first meeting, he had seemed interesting, bright, unusual, an extraordinary creative person, someone who wasn't afraid to be funny and rejected stereotypes. Now, Alex looked simply strange and awkward. She had hooked him. Catherine understood that perfectly. Alex used every second they were on the road to impress her, literally bending over backward, even sweating. A pathetic sight, of course. But Catherine tried not to show her true feelings, politely smiled at the passenger's jokes, gave monosyllabic answers to his questions, pretended to be carefully watching the road and not wanting to be distracted. And she waited for the moment when she could finally drop off her companion. Alex's presence was very burdensome. I'll drop you off here, because I need to turn onto my road further on. Catherine parked near a deserted bus stop. Alex clearly didn't want to part with her. He just sat there talking about something, looking at her desperately with his small eyes. He was close to panic. It looked strange, very strange. Catherine had never encountered anything like this before. How could she politely get rid of this lovesick chatterbox without offending him? I have to go, she interrupted her companion, looking at her watch. My son is waiting at home. Maybe mentioning the child would cool Alex's ardor a little, and the man would understand that she wasn't just a beautiful girl with whom he could easily and without obligations spend time, but a woman with a child. So you have a son? Alex exclaimed, his admiration not diminishing, rather the opposite. Yes, and he's home alone right now. He's called several times already. Go, of course. Alex reached for the door handle, but then turned back and asked, And a husband? Do you have a husband? No, I'm raising him alone. Catherine blurted out automatically and immediately regretted saying it. She should have lied and said she had someone. Otherwise, it seemed like she had given Alex a reason for further courtship. See you around. The man smiled broadly and finally left the car. Catherine exhaled with relief and pressed the gas pedal to the floor. No, she wasn't going to meet Alex again. To avoid running into the unwanted admirer, Catherine stopped going to the games. Helen, of course, often invited her, but Catherine constantly came up with reasons to refuse. It was a shame, of course. She enjoyed spending time with those pleasant, cheerful people. But now, Alex had become a regular member of the team. Alex keeps asking about you, Helen once shared with her colleague and friend. He's trying to get your phone number from me. I promised to ask you if I can give it to him. So can I? No, Catherine exclaimed. Absolutely not. It's your business, but he seems like a decent guy. He works, he's kind, he's generous, he has a good sense of humor. And he seems to be seriously in love with you. He's always subtly trying to find out things about you from us. But nothing escapes me. Helen, please tell him I have a partner, Catherine asked. Let him not get his hopes up. He's just not my type at all, you understand? I understand, of course, what's not to understand. Did you stop going to the quiz because of him? Catherine thought for a moment and nodded. She was tired of hiding the truth from her friend. I need to tell Susan to stop inviting him, Helen said thoughtfully. He's a valuable member of the team, knows a lot, but my friend is more important. And he works with Susan, right? Yes, Yes, her colleague. He works in the design department. Some more time passed. And then one day, Helen announced that Alex no longer went to the quiz. He had missed several games already. He realized you weren't showing up, and apparently lost interest. It seems he was only coming to the meetings because of you. So come back. There's nothing to be afraid of anymore. But Catherine was in the midst of a new romance with a handsome, tall guy, a little younger than her. She had recently met him at the gym. Tall, moderately muscular, stylish, everything she liked. So now Catherine went on dates with Max in the evenings. She didn't have time for the quiz. But Alex still found a way to contact her. He found her page on VContact and started. The man looked through and didn't hesitate to like every single one of her photos. And now, every day, he sent her messages, sometimes congratulating her on a holiday, sometimes wishing her a good day, sometimes just sending cute pictures, kittens, flowers, hearts. Like a teenager, honestly. Catherine, of course, didn't reply. Any normal person would understand that enough was enough. You weren't wanted. It was time to stop. But not Alex. And then one day, Alex sent her a letter with an invitation to go to a movie premiere together. He even suggested bringing her son with her. He wanted to meet him. Catherine replied that she was in a relationship, and Max, her man, probably wouldn't like that. After that, there was no news from Alex for a couple of days. Catherine had decided that it was all over. But no, the situation only worsened. One evening, leaving the office, Catherine bumped into a smiling Alex. It was already December, and it was freezing outside. It was unknown how long Alex had stood by the office gate waiting for the object of his love. His fleshy nose had turned completely red. The huge bouquet of roses in his hands was covered in frost. But the man didn't seem to notice. Seeing Catherine, his eyes shone with a truly puppy-like delight. The woman didn't take the flowers from him then, and very harshly asked him to leave her alone. Yes, she had to hurt the persistent admirer, but what could she do if he didn't understand otherwise? "I will fight," Alex said quietly, looking sadly at Catherine. "I know you have to fight for love, and everything will be all right." Catherine sighed heavily and headed towards her car. All she needed was for him to actually start fighting for her. Alex went quiet for a while. For about a month, he didn't show himself in any way, and Catherine relaxed, somehow even forgot about him, considering her problems solved now. Catherine had a wonderful New Year's holiday. She went to a ski resort with Max and Sam. They walked a lot, rode sleds and tubes, built snowmen, had snowball fights. Catherine even learned snowboarding under Max's guidance, which she was incredibly proud of. But all good things come to an end quickly. The holidays were replaced by weekdays. Catherine went back to work, returned to her routine. One evening, closer to the end of the day, Max called her. He was on a business trip in another city at the moment. "What's going on?" The man's voice sounded strange, either upset or confused. "Everything seems fine," replied Catherine, not understanding anything. It felt like she was being accused of something, but what? Her conscience was completely clear. "So it's normal to see someone else while your man is on a business trip?" "What are you talking about? I'm not with anyone." "Just don't lie. I trusted you so much, and you—" "Well, what? I'll explain." "They've already sent me your photos. It's useless to deny it." "What photos?" Catherine absolutely didn't understand what he was talking about, but Max's voice sounded hurt and disappointed. "We have nothing more to talk about." Max hung up, and Catherine sat over her report for a long time afterward, trying to gather her thoughts. And only when she got home Did she understand what was going on? When she went to her V-contact page, there was another message from Alex. Photos from our date. I love you, darling. Catherine read the caption under the folder aloud. The woman clicked on the yellow icon and gasped in surprise. There were pictures. They showed her posing in the arms of Alex, who was looking at her lovingly. Catherine was smiling charmingly. Alex was gently hugging her, and in some photos they were even kissing. Catherine had never been to these places, and certainly had never kissed Alex. But the pictures looked surprisingly realistic. Someone had very skillfully edited the photos in a special program, clearly better than Photoshop. Alex works in the design department, Helen had said. He probably knew how to do things like that and more. But why? Why did he do it? And he even sent the photos to Max. Apparently, she would have to tell Max about the persistent admirer who wouldn't leave her alone. Alex really scared Catherine now. Before, he had only annoyed her, burdened her, caused antipathy. But after this situation with the photos, he scared her. His attachment to her now looked like an obsession, and the man's mental health. It raised serious questions for Catherine. A normal person couldn't behave like that. At that moment, a new message arrived from Alex. Just look how great we look together. I can't stop admiring our photos. Catherine called Max, tried to explain everything to him, but he wouldn't listen. It was hurtful. If Max valued and loved her, he wouldn't have given up so easily. Even this eccentric Alex was fighting for her like that. No obstacles bothered him. But here, perhaps Max had never had real feelings for her. And, to be completely honest, their relationship had become somewhat cold lately. The trip to the ski resort had improved the situation for a short time, but overall the relationship had run its course, and she had to admit it. Catherine was alone again. She blocked her V-contact page so as not to be upset by Alex's letters. She even got a job elsewhere. And not just because Alex occasionally met her at the gate at the end of the workday. She simply found a place with a higher salary. Catherine stopped going to the quiz, and communication with old acquaintances gradually faded away. The woman had no time. Such a period had begun in her life. Work, son, apartment renovations. Life spun and whirled her around. Alex, to Catherine's great relief, finally disappeared from the radar. Now he didn't know where to look for her. Out of sight, out of mind, as they say. Catherine sincerely hoped that the man had found his soulmate and was now pouring the full stream of his unspent tenderness onto that lucky woman. Several more months passed. By that time, Catherine had forgotten all about Alex. She had a new life, new worries and troubles. On that warm autumn evening, Catherine decided to take her son to the cinema. Her car had broken down and had been at the service centre for a week. So after the screening, she had to call a taxi. It was already late, and buses were infrequent. And she and Sam were tired. It had been a hectic day. Soon, a grey car pulled up to them. Catherine and Sam settled comfortably in the back seat. The driver, an overweight man in a cap with a wide brim, greeted them hoarsely and confirmed the destination. Everything was as usual, and the car sped along the semi-empty city roads. There were very few cars on them at this time. Catherine and Sam were engrossed in discussing the film, so they didn't immediately notice that the driver had turned the wrong way. Only much later, when fields began to flash by, did Catherine realize. I don't understand. Are we taking the bypass? Not through the city? That's far. We need to go to Kominarov Street. That's the other way. The driver didn't answer. Instead, the woman heard a characteristic click. The man had locked the doors for some reason. Catherine understood something was happening, A nasty chill ran down her spine. "What are you doing?" Catherine tried to make her voice sound authoritative and calm. All she needed was to scare Sam, who was already sensing that something was wrong. And then the driver turned around. Catherine flinched. She recognized Alex. "I think I laughed then," Catherine recalled, thoughtfully twisting a strand of her long hair around her finger. Meanwhile, he was watching her closely, hanging on her every word. She told the story so vividly that scenes from a movie seemed to unfold before the guy's eyes. And here was the climax. The main villain reveals his face. "Yes," Catherine laughed. But it was a nervous laugh. The woman immediately understood. Things were bad. The familiar face didn't calm her. Quite the opposite. Catherine realized she was trapped by the strange, obsessed Alex. And worst of all, Sam was now in his power. What would happen to them next? The prospects were unclear and very uncertain. "Right now! Stop the car!" Catherine gathered all her willpower to avoid looking scared. She remembered the influence she had had over this man before. Maybe it would work now. After all, he had been ready to do anything for her at least. "I'll stop, of course, but later." Alex was now watching the road carefully. "Soon you'll understand that this is for the best." "For whom?" Catherine asked, her hope for a good outcome melting away before her eyes. "For you, for me, for him, for all of us. You'll see. We'll be happy together." "Where are you taking us?" "To a very good place. You'll like it there." Then Alex turned and winked cheerfully at Sam. Sam was frozen with fear. The boy guessed. Something terrible was happening. But what? He didn't understand yet and was afraid to ask. The car rolled further and further along the country highway. Very rarely did they meet other cars. It was dark outside. You couldn't see anything. Catherine had no idea where they were. A sticky, cold fear churned in her stomach. "Let us go." Sam finally spoke up. The boy looked so scared and pathetic that Catherine's heart ached. "Now, why would you say that?" Alex gently countered. So far, he showed no signs of aggression, but who knew what would happen next? "I want to go home," Sam answered honestly. "And what's so good about that?" Alex asked. "Your mom runs off to work in the morning. You rush to school. Lessons, tests, homework, sports. I also know you go swimming 3 times a week. Constant hustle and bustle. You hardly see each other. But with me, you'll always be together, as children should be with their parents. I'll take care of you, I promise." Sam sighed and stared out the window. He tightly squeezed his mother's hand. The boy's palm was sweaty and yet very cold. And Catherine thought. So, Alex was taking them somewhere unknown. Apparently, he had been watching them for a long time. He even knew that Sam went to the pool 3 times a week. And he had ambushed them at the cinema, which meant he knew they had gone to the movies. Judging by everything, Alex didn't intend to do anything bad, in his own understanding, at least for now. So she needed to behave quietly and compliantly, not to anger the sick man. And Catherine no longer doubted that Alex was sick. She had noticed some oddities about this man before. Take his bright outfits and the inadequacy of his behavior. But at first, it was attributed to his creative nature, and then to being deeply in love. Catherine chose her tactic: wait, observe, and not provoke aggression. And then she would see how to act. Alex turned off the smooth road, and the car jolted over some bumps. Catherine felt the bottom of the car scraping against the grass. It seemed they were about to get stuck, bogged down in a pit or road mud. But it seemed Alex knew the way perfectly. He confidently drove forward and forward, saying that they were almost home. Finally, the man stopped the car. Before unlocking the doors, he warned, "Don't even think about running. I have this." And the man, with a gentle smile, showed them a crossbow. Catherine didn't know if it was real or a sports one, but it looked impressive, dangerous, and quite deadly. "I'm very accurate." Alex was clearly proud of this fact. Then he unlocked the doors and ordered his captives to get out. They obeyed. Where else could they go? It was dark all around, not like in the city, where the outlines of objects are visible in the light from neon signs, streetlights, and house windows. No, there was impenetrable darkness in which it was impossible to make anything out. Catherine only realized that they were in the forest. Alex took her hand, firmly, but at the same time, gently, somehow. "And you, boy, hold on, or we'll get lost." Catherine nodded. Sam had long since clung to her and was trembling with fear. The woman encouragingly stroked her son's back, promised him everything would be all right, although she herself greatly doubted it. Alex turned on a flashlight and led Catherine and Sam after him. They walked for quite a long time. The woman and the boy stumbled, but the man walked steadily and confidently, clearly having been here often and knowing where to step. Finally, they reached the hut. Right in the middle of the forest stood something resembling a village house, a gable roof, shutters on the windows, even a porch with shaky steps. "What is this?" Catherine was surprised. The house looked too unnatural in the middle of the forest, like something out of a scary fairy tale. "My grandfather and I built this a long time ago," Alex began to explain. "They used to bring me to his village to visit, and we loved walking in the forest. He taught me how to use a crossbow here, by the way. We built this house for a long time. Grandfather said, 'You never know. Maybe there'll be a war and we'll have to hide in the forests.'" Catherine concluded that Alex's illness was probably hereditary. It seemed his grandfather was also a strange person. "You know what a deep cellar we dug," the man continued, recalling his childhood. "And we made a canned food storage there, just in case. Come in." Alex opened the unexpectedly strong, heavy door with a key and let his guests go first. He followed and locked the door with the key. He took a kerosene lamp from some cabinet, lit it, and Catherine finally had a chance to look around. It was almost an ordinary room in a village house. In the center was a round table on bent legs, with several Vienna chairs around it. In the corner was an old, worn-out sofa. Near the wall with windows, right between them, was a tall, narrow cabinet. A simple and painfully familiar interior. Catherine had seen something similar when she vacationed in the village with her distant aunt in childhood. But still, the room was sharply different from an ordinary living space. It was all about the bars, with which someone, most likely Alex himself, had fenced off part of the space. It looked like a cell for dangerous defendants in court, only much larger. From the inside, this cage was divided by a wall, a brick, solid one. It went from the floor almost to the ceiling. "This, did you and your grandfather make this too?" Catherine, unexpectedly even to herself, chuckled. She suddenly found it amusing to imagine this scene. A grandfather and grandson fencing off part of a room with bars, building walls out of bricks. It somehow seemed delusional, but also funny. "No, I did this myself," Alex admitted. "I was preparing for your arrival. I even had to take a vacation to get everything done." Catherine understood that she and Sam were about to be put in cages. She couldn't let that happen. There, behind bars, Catherine would be too defenseless, too vulnerable. She and her son would have almost no chance of escaping. Why cages? We won't go anywhere from here anyway. Catherine tried to reason with Alex. First, we don't know the way. Second, it's so cozy here, so nice, quiet, peaceful. There's no one around. Why would we leave such a good place? Sam watched his mother with wide eyes and remained silent. The woman saw that her son understood her tactic and was playing along as best he could. He wasn't crying, wasn't begging to be let go, was trying to pretend that he was quite comfortable here. As long as Alex didn't catch on. These aren't cages. This is your room, Alex explained with a smile. I'm very glad you like it here. I tried my best, cleaned and washed everything for your arrival, but you'll still have to live in these rooms for now. I don't trust you yet. I'm afraid of losing you. Alex took a bunch of keys from his pocket, opened the door to the larger cage, and gestured for Catherine to enter. She obeyed. What else could she do? Angering a sick person, especially one with an impressive crossbow, was dangerous. He was in a good mood now, but everything could change in a second. They were alone in the middle of the forest. There was no help to be expected. Then Alex put Sam in the other section of the cage. Now mother and son were separated by a brick wall, and from the rest of the world by a strong steel grate. Of course they could see each other when they came to the bars of the cage, and they could even touch hands. But this separation was very frightening. It would have been much more pleasant to be together and be able to hug each other. In the corner of her room, Catherine noticed an inflatable mattress covered with a soft blanket patterned with red roses, and also a bucket, the purpose of which the woman immediately guessed, of course. Alex wasn't going to let them out for a long time, that was for sure. The woman suddenly felt nauseous from the stress she had experienced, the fear for the future, the worries about her son. What had he done to deserve all this? Well, you're settled in. Alex sat on the table in front of the cage and looked at his captives with tenderness. How long I've waited for this moment, Catherine. I missed you very much. And then he told his story, and the woman realized that she was indeed dealing with a mentally ill person. Alex had been different from other people since childhood. He began to realize this closer to school age. He wasn't interested in games with children, cartoons, or socializing. He preferred to sit somewhere in a corner and pour cereal from one glass to another. The boy could watch for hours as the grains flowed back and forth. It was mesmerizing. And Alex always had a developed imagination. Puddles seemed to him like gates to another world, clouds like points from which evil creatures watched people, trees like evil trolls who had specially disguised themselves as plants to weaken the vigilance of their victims and eat them. The world seemed to the child a dangerous, evil place, so he preferred to stay in his room. The street, the noise of crowds, open, bright spaces, all this frightened him greatly. But his mother, Alex's mother, didn't agree with this state of affairs. She was sure her son needed socialization. The boy didn't attend kindergarten because he was often sick and didn't want to go outside to the yard. So his mother dragged him to crowded places, playgrounds, theaters, various parks and squares. Sometimes, against Alex's will, she would push him into a crowd of children, thinking that her son would gradually fit in. But it didn't work. The children sensed that Alex was different and didn't accept him. At best, they avoided him. At worst, they teased and hurt him. But his mother was always there. Like a hawk, she would swoop down on her son's tormentors and stand up for her beloved little one. But it was impossible to constantly be under his mother's protection. School began, and he was left alone with cruel children and indifferent teachers. and with this strange, incomprehensible world from which poor Alex so wanted to hide. At school, Alex was bullied from the very first grade. They teased him, pinched him, took his things, pushed him, flicked his nose. But they never really seriously beat him. What pleasure was there in fighting with such a meek weakling? Alex studied poorly and didn't socialize with children. Sometimes, upon returning home, he would immediately retreat to his room and close the door behind him. Here he felt safe and could talk without outsiders hearing to his friend, the only one, but the most loyal and reliable. It was a red-haired, overweight boy with bright green eyes that sometimes shone like searchlights. He first appeared when Alex was about 5 years old and had been by his side ever since, growing up and changing with Alex. His name was Tony. Tony was very smart and supported Alex in everything. It was he who once prompted him to trip Jones on the stairs, a classmate who bothered Alex more than others. The guy flew down so spectacularly. How he screamed. In the end, he broke his leg and hit his head and didn't show up at school for a long time. Beautiful. Thanks, Tony. And in general, Tony suggested many useful ideas to his friend. Heating a thermometer on the radiator to pretend to be sick and not go to school. Secretly taking money from his mother's purse for sweets. Getting rid of the annoying parakeet that had started screeching so unpleasantly in the mornings. The most interesting thing was that his mother didn't notice Tony. It was especially funny to watch Tony jump right in front of her, wave his arms, and make faces, while she continued doing her business as if nothing was happening. Alex would start laughing, and his mother would look at him with apprehension and surprise. She didn't understand what was going on. Alex's mother eventually had to admit that something was wrong with her son. His behavior wasn't a matter of character. These were oddities of a completely different kind. The teachers advised her to take the child to a psychiatrist. That's how Alex got an official diagnosis, which his mother couldn't accept. She kept taking her son to doctors, hoping the verdict wouldn't be confirmed. But the doctors were unanimous, naming the same illness. The boy was transferred to homeschooling. The guy sighed with relief, not having to see the boring faces of his classmates and teachers every day. What could be better? He wouldn't have lasted much longer. But then the treatment began. Pills, endless procedures, talks with psychologists, massages. Soon Alex realized, because of all this, he was losing his connection with Tony. His friend appeared less and less often and looked pale, almost transparent. No, Alex didn't want to lose the only close person who always understood and supported him, and so he categorically refused treatment. It was a difficult period. His mother and the doctors insisted, threatened. The guy was even hospitalized. But he spat out the pills, lunged at the medical staff, bit, scratched. In short, he did everything to be left alone. He fought as hard as he could for his only friend. Tony himself suggested a way out. He came one day and declared that it would be better for Alex to behave more compliantly, endure the massages and physical therapy, and take all the pills except for the small blue ones. It was better to spit those out, but discreetly. They were the ones driving Tony away. Alex did as his friend advised, and life immediately became easier. His mother and the doctors calmed down. Alex was discharged from the hospital, and some of the diagnoses were removed. His mother was overjoyed. She thought the situation was improving. Alex did somehow gradually learn to interact with other people and the world. Sometimes Tony, faithful Tony, who was now always by his side, would advise him on how to behave. It turned out that Alex's fantasies about the invisible creatures inhabiting this world weren't delusions, but interesting, vivid ideas. The guy started drawing everything he imagined in his head and posting these works online. Unexpectedly, they found their fans. People wrote to Alex that he had talent, advised him to study design. Alex did just that, graduated from college, and even got a job. By then, he had learned to interact with the world and hardly stood out from the crowd. Alex pretended so well that his psychiatric diagnosis was even removed. Tony suggested what to tell the doctors and how to behave. No one noticed anymore that he was special, or chosen, as Tony called him. Alex graduated from college, got his license, and even made friends. It turned out that not all people were moral monsters like his classmates. You could quite easily interact with some. It was even interesting. His mother was happy for her son. She understood, of course, that there were oddities in his behavior, but she turned a blind eye. After all, Alex was a creative person. Such people had a right to originality. And then I met you. Alex looked at Catherine through the bars with eyes full of love. I understood that you had to be mine, and there was no other way. And Tony said I was right. Tony? Catherine repeated. So he's still with you? Of course. Alex nodded. He's standing here now, happy for me. A true friend. So, Alex fell in love for the first time in his life, immediately with all his heart, with all his soul attached to Catherine. She seemed to him otherworldly, incredibly beautiful, kind, smart, the very best. Next to her, the man was filled with energy and strength. These were incredible sensations. Alex found her page on social media and spent hours looking at the woman's photos, admiring her eyes, hair, graceful figure. He thought Catherine had liked him at their first meeting. All that remained was to meet again at the same game and invite the girl on a date. Alex thought Catherine would gladly agree. After all, she had looked at him like that, and even seemed embarrassed by him. But the woman refused and, in fact, behaved very coldly and distantly at their next meeting, despite all of Alex's attempts to win her favor. This hurt. It hurt badly. It also angered him. But Tony, faithful Tony, ordered him not to give up and to continue the fight. And Alex continued. He wrote to Catherine on social media, waited for her after work with flowers, confessed his feelings. But it was all in vain. The woman was only annoyed by his attention. And then she even started dating another man. Alex, of course, found out who he was. At first, he wanted to kill his beloved's chosen one, physically destroy him. But Tony talked him out of it, said it was dangerous, and suggested the option with the photos. Alex liked this idea. He was skilled at working with photo editors. It wasn't difficult for him to create realistic photos in which he and Catherine looked like a happy couple. How Alex liked the result of this work. He could spend hours admiring the resulting photos and even almost believed that the moments captured in them had actually taken place in reality. But most importantly, Catherine's man believed this story. It even worked out too easily. Max broke up with Catherine. She was free again. But this didn't change her attitude towards Alex. On the contrary, upon learning what he had done, Catherine got angry, instead of admiring his resourcefulness and persistence. That's when Tony suggested the hut option to his friend. He assured him that Catherine would only be with him if she got to know him better. And since she categorically refused dates and meetings, the only option left was the cage. We stayed there for several weeks. Catherine told her incredible story in a calm, even voice, showing no sign of emotion. He came every evening and stayed with us until late at night. Sometimes he even slept there, with us, on the sofa opposite our cages. He brought delicious food, sometimes from a restaurant, sometimes homemade. He fed us as if we were his dear guests, and he constantly talked to me. Sometimes, when he wanted only me to listen to him, he would give Sam a player. Sam would gladly put on his headphones and go to the corner of the cage. Later, my son told me that during those moments he detached himself from what was happening, and it helped him. Alex, when Sam couldn't hear, would confess his love to me. He was probably shy in front of the child. He showered me with compliments, said I was the most important person in his life, painted pictures of our happy future. Really, did such strong feelings overwhelm the guy? Daniel was surprised. Everything Catherine said didn't fit in his head. So you still don't understand? He just fixated on me. I think it's a manifestation of his illness. His diagnoses were officially removed back then, in his teenage years. But in reality, he is a deeply sick person. The examination confirmed it. I saw it myself even before he took me away. And later I was completely convinced. His imaginary Tony scared me to death. Who knows what he might order him to do to us? Catherine behaved calmly and neutrally with Alex, pretending that she found him pleasant and interesting, but she didn't let him get close, keeping her distance. She showed that she was still afraid of him. After all, he had promised not to even touch her until she let him. So Catherine had to balance on the edge. On the one hand, show favour so as not to anger him, and on the other hand, remain distant and thereby keep Alex at a safe distance. It seemed she was doing quite well. But Catherine couldn't know how much longer she would be able to keep the situation under control. She was waiting for the right moment. She knew that sooner or later something would happen that would allow her and her son to break free. She believed in it with all her soul. Sometimes Alex would become strange, listless, weak-willed, lifeless. His eyes, usually burning with enthusiasm and admiration, would suddenly dim. It seemed he even started to get headaches. The man would clutch his forehead, grow pale. In this state, Alex scared Catherine. It seemed that his sanity left him for a while. What could you expect from a person in this situation? All she could do was hope that everything would be all right. Usually the attacks, or whatever they were, passed quickly. Alex would immediately compose himself and hastily leave the hut, sometimes without even saying goodbye, as if he was running somewhere. Catherine assumed that after what happened, the man rushed home to take some important pill. One evening, Alex, as sometimes happened with him, suddenly seemed to switch off. His face turned grey, his eyes became fixed. He had just been describing to Catherine how he would take her to a tropical island where they would swim in warm ocean waters, and a moment later he had turned into a person indifferent to everything. At that moment, he dropped the key under the table, the key to the cage where Sam was locked up. Several minutes passed. Alex came to his senses and, as often happened, rushed out of the hut without looking back, and the key remained on the floor. Catherine saw that she could reach it, and she did. She almost dislocated her shoulder, but she still managed to get the key. Her heart was pounding wildly in her chest. Were they saved now? True, there were still many obstacles ahead. Everything depended on Sam. Could the boy find his way? Would he get lost in the forest? Catherine, with some effort, opened the door to her son's cage. He darted into the room. His eyes were bright, his cheeks flushed. "Mom, how do I open your door?" "You can't. You have to run now, as fast as you can. Find your way to the road. Bring help." Sam nodded briefly, understanding that there was no time for hysterics or unnecessary questions. He grabbed a chair and confidently smashed the window with it. He pulled his sweater over his head, wrapped his hands in it so as not to cut himself, and removed the remaining glass. Catherine was amazed. She wouldn't have thought of it so quickly herself. And then they both, mother and son, heard the sound of an approaching car. Alex had discovered the missing key and decided to return. "Mom, it's him! What do we do?" Sam's voice was filled with panic. "Run! Just run!" Catherine shouted. And Sam, with the ease of a street cat, slipped out the window. A few minutes later, Alex burst into the room. Seeing the broken window and the open cage, he immediately understood everything and roared with rage. Catherine huddled in the furthest corner of her prison. She was ready for anything. Alex would chase Sam or attack her with his fists. But the man suddenly started crying, pitifully, like a child. He sat right on the floor and sobbed, his whole body shaking. "Why? Why are you doing this to me?" he groaned. "I did everything for you. I would build a house, bring delicious food. Did I treat you badly? Why? Why can't you love me?" Catherine was bewildered. Logically, she should feel fear towards Alex and hate him with all her soul. But the woman felt very sorry for him. What was this? The notorious Stockholm Syndrome. "Alex," the woman said as gently as possible. "Alex, it's all right, it's okay. Everything will be fine, do you hear?" He looked up at her with eyes full of tears and hope. Alex didn't look like a dangerous criminal now. Before Catherine was a confused, deeply sick person. He began to swear his love to her again. Catherine said something in reply, talking to Alex, stalling for time. If only Sam could make it to the road. If only people would notice the boy and help him. And then, Catherine had no idea how much time passed before people in uniform burst into the hut. How glad she was to see them. Two of them immediately restrained Alex and led him outside. The others began searching the room. One of the police officers let Catherine out of the cage. What happiness it was for the woman to walk in the forest, breathe the fresh air, see nature, the open space. Her confinement was over. Freedom was the best thing that could ever be in life. Catherine clearly realized this at that moment. "Well, and the rest, in general, you know. The end of the story." Catherine smiled at Daniel. Daniel didn't answer. He was thinking about his own situation. No, fate hadn't brought him together with Catherine for nothing. Her story. It helped him see his own behavior in a new light. Sarah. He was pursuing her, just as Alex pursued Catherine. If Alex had some justification, a psychiatric diagnosis, he, Daniel, had none. He had simply gotten it into his head that Sarah had to be his, as if the girl was just an object that had no right to her own opinion. Daniel decided to call Sarah today, apologize for his behavior, and promise that he would stop pursuing her and trying to win her favor.